Aquaman. Aquaman 1 was not a great movie, but it was at least fun. Still bloated, still kind of boring and weird, but it was like, oh wow, this is the first DC movie, I think, where they were pretending to have fun. It was kind of a weird disaster, but also you could see James Wan's directing. You could see a lot of his style. You could see him put effort into the film. You could tell that people involved were actually trying to create something. I knew before watching Aquaman 2, it was going to be an interesting experience because it's trying to exist in between the Snyderverse and now the James Gunn universe. Unfortunately, it just did not seem like the same passion was in this project. It did not seem like Jason Momoa cared at all. It did not seem like James Wan cared much at all. Both Randall Park and Amber Heard's performances were just terrible. They stuck out in the movie. Nobody was doing a particularly great job, so it was kind of embarrassing that they were sticking out so much. The very beginning of the movie, the editing is already atrocious. They have an opening monologue that I guess they're trying to use to set the tone of the rest of the film for, and they're trying to be like super epic, and he's like, everyone's good at something. Want to know something else? I'm good at one thing, kicking butt. But the way it was edited was like how my reviews are edited. Like there was no space between the sentences.
But I don't care. You know why? Because I'm also good at something else.
But this is a movie, and it's theoretically supposed to be an opening monologue, and I just don't understand why they didn't let anything breathe. It was very jarring, and before I could think about it any further, the song Born to Be Wild started playing. I was like, oh, well, I guess we're doing this now. We got a montage, and he's a dad now, and there's a baby, and the baby pees on his face. Then he's like, well, I won't let that happen again, and then Amber Heard uses her water-bending powers to bend the baby's pee into his face. And she laughs about it. She's like, tee-hee, I put baby piss in your face. I'm not making that up. That was all within this montage. There was a lot of Guinness product placements. I could count at least 3 of them in entirely different scenes, entirely different tones and moods and contexts. Some of them verbal. There was a scene of Aquaman walking through the jungle with his brother, and he's like, when this is all done, I'm gonna have a nice pint of Guinness. Yeah.
Great big greasy cheeseburger and a pint of Guinness.
Refreshing, crisp pint of Guinness. They're just littered throughout every set, basically. Just cans of Guinness cheated out towards the audience. There's like really sad music over the line. You gotta give your baby a sibling, because they'll have no friends growing up. They gotta have a sibling, otherwise they'll be an only child. And the music's like, such a sad, serious thing. A huge chunk of the movie is just kind of blue balling buildup, but not even blue balling, because blue balling implies that you're actually excited for something, that you're like ready, and it just never delivers, whereas this, it's just the least exciting sort of build-up imaginable. It's implied build-up. It's like, oh, we're building up to something, but it's not even exciting. It's not even intriguing in the slightest. This movie reminded me a lot of Valerian and the Thousandth Planet and the Thousands Planets. There were a lot of fish people. There were like clubs, a bunch of characters, and some devices that would just get introduced and used immediately and then ignored for the rest of the film. Aquaman had a camouflage suit that did not cover his face or hands, but it made his whole body invisible anyway, not just where the suit was over. So I don't know how that worked. There were talking crab people. One of them was Gimli, and one of them was Martin Short. Actually, Martin Short was not a crab person, but he was this fish guy. Yeah.
Traditionally, the kings of Atlantis have turned a blind eye to the sunken citadel.
We had a Lord of the Rings crab people, I guess.
Come on, you spineless worms!
A lot of things in the movie actually reminded me of Lord of the Rings. There was like a big bad villain who's like gonna be awoken by a slumber, because the bad guy who wears the bug mask, he's like, I want revenge on Aquaman. Remember? He made me sad. He finds a trident, but the trident is black.
It's the Black Trident.
So he uses the trident, and the trident gives him power, and it's like, you're basically like venomed now, even though it like not visually, I guess, but just spiritually. If he venoms so hard, there's global warming and the ice is going to melt the villain. He's trapped in the ice, the Lord of the Rings villain, and he's going to be he's going to be melted, unfrozen too, and that would be bad. But the black guy trusts that this Lord of the Rings villain will live up to his end of the bargain and give him power power overwhelming, I guess. There's a lot of CG nonsense in this movie with no point or purpose. It kind of just blends into itself. There's a lot of action scenes and none of them are exciting. None of them are engaging. It's all just a bunch of like, oh, wow, I can see the money on the screen. That's some money that you spent here. It's not for anything. It's not money that is spent for any like good reason. A lot of action scenes that are allegedly supposed to feel exciting, but only wind up feeling exhausting. Some of the underwater effects do look great, like some of the machines and textures underwater, just only in a couple shots. Most of it, it's not convincing, but there were a couple shots where I'm like, damn, that looks like pretty realistic. The lighting was just right on some of the shots. Some not bad effects work overall, I guess. There were some buff shark people and they had abs. Those were cool. There was a fish guy that was like, I don't know, like a king or something maybe. He seemed like a Star Wars character. They interrogate him and they put on a diving helmet and they slowly start filling it up with air so that he'll drown because he's a fish. You could see maybe on paper someone would think, oh, that's a funny idea, but by the point it happens in the movie, it's already just so exhausting and it's not delivered very well. Like, why doesn't the fish guy continue trying to pull it off with his fins or hands or whatever? I don't know. It seems like he's not spending a lot of energy actually trying to solve the situation or get out of that. He's just kind of letting Aquaman turn the dial up and fill it with air. There were some giant grasshopper creatures. They're on an island. It was kind of like a King Kong island, I guess. There's a bunch of big bugs. There's a desert scene. There's a bunch of different set pieces, but they're all just so forgettable and they all feel so recycled and they all feel so derivative. It's like a bunch of different movies in this movie and none of them special, none of them adding anything new to cinema. There were killer plants. They were chased and then Aquaman saw a sign and it said, "True kings build bridges." And so he kicks over the statue and makes a bridge out of it, even though that's not what the sign meant. And his brother's like, it was a metaphor, but it worked out anyway. And then they reincorporate that back at the end of the movie because it's very important because he builds bridges. He's a true king, right?
True king builds bridges, right?
But that was just a metaphor.
It was a metaphor for at the end when he's like, see, the aqua people and the regular humans that don't like 90s, 2000s house music people, we can get along. We could all be bros. To stop global warming was what they were saying at the end, is to people get together to stop global warming. I definitely wrote the words "so sleepy" in my notes more than once. The second time with a lot of O's and a lot of E's. There's a scene where Randall Park, Dr. Park, he's spilling the beans on the operation, being like, it wasn't me, you helped me. And then just random characters explode from out of the wall behind him, just like the explosion from behind, like that's how they enter, is just an immediate explosion through the door. And then it sends Aquaman flying and Aquaman says, I hate when that happens. And most people watching that, they would be like, what does he mean by that? But as a true Kino fan of the first Aquaman, who I've seen it twice, it's a reference to the common criticism of the first movie about how everybody just exploded out of a wall in the first, but that happened like 4 or 5 times in the first movie. It was like how they ended every scene, with somebody exploding through a wall, or how they got to the next scene. They would start a new scene, just be like, well, we're having a conversation here, and then it's an action scene, like, I'm just coming out of a wall, exploding. It was a reference to the first film, and almost kind of like a tongue-in-cheek criticism, like, ooh, we're self-deprecating, see, we get it. But that joke was probably lost on most people, but I got it, because I'm smarter. This movie couldn't decide on a tone. I'm not sure what it was trying to be. So with this film being the last of the Snyderverse, it is quite the unceremonious swan song. It doesn't even try to feel like an ending of the universe. In the Flash movie that came out earlier this year, they had a post-credits scene of Aquaman, and the entire reason why that post-credits scene existed is so that they could say, oh, actually, he still exists in this universe, because the Flash reset the universe, and that was their excuse for having a new universe. It was like, oh, okay, so we have the Snyderverse, and then we did a multiverse story in the Flash, and now it's going to be the James Gunn universe, and that was their kind of explanation. And then they're like, oh wait, we still have an Aquaman movie coming out. We should have a post-credits scene to let people know that it's not a waste of time to see the new Aquaman movie, and that it's not leading towards nothing, and it's actually in both universes. See, Aquaman is in both universes. You can still buy a ticket to the movie, please. And I guess they just lied, because they don't even hint at anything anything in the James Gunn universe, as far as I know. I was expecting some kind of post-credits in Aquaman being like, ooh, are you excited for this new thing that's happening in the James Gunn universe? I was expecting something like that, but instead it was just fucking Patrick Wilson eating a cockroach in a burger, and that was like, oh, that's funny, because he likes it, and that's it. It had the option to either get us excited about the James Gunn universe, or have an actual ending to the Snyderverse and be like, oh, you know, they don't even have to wrap everything up. They can just make it seem like they're acknowledging that it's the end. They could just make it seem like they know, but they didn't know, because there's no plan for this whole fucking IP. Warner Brothers doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. I think they were just hoping that this was successful enough that they could just continue it. I don't think there will be another James Momoa Aquaman unless there's like a small cameo in like fucking 10 or 20 years, like the Nicolas Cage Superman in The Flash or whatever. I don't think anybody involved with Aquaman 2 is expecting to make an Aquaman 3. So that was kind of funny and annoying. They lied to get us to buy tickets to the movie, and not that many people did anyway, so go fuck yourselves. So because Aquaman has a baby, the bad guy kidnaps the baby. There's a scene where Aquaman's dad is looking after the baby, and then it cuts to the house being on fire because the villain was there, and the dad's like crying outside. We could have had 5 seconds where we believed that maybe the baby was in danger. We could have had like 5 or 10 seconds where we were like, oh, what's happened to the baby? Like cut to the house on fire and not know what's happened to the baby. And then the dad saying, he's been kidnapped by the bad guy. That was a possibility, but instead, the bad guy, as he is showing up, says, I'm going to keep the baby alive so that Aquaman can see him die later. So literally before there's even a fraction of a second to think that the baby might be in danger or to not know whether or not the baby's in danger, the villain just says out loud, the baby is not currently in danger. Because that would be too scary for parents in the audience, and we live in a baby supremacist society. If you want to know who controls society, look to who you cannot criticize, and that is babies. We are experiencing a massive baby supremacist uprising in the United States, and I'm here to fight back against it. We need to stop the babyriarchy. The babyriarchy. I'm gonna leave you alive. He says as he shows up to the scene. Okay, there's a part where whales show up and they use their sonar to blow up people in the ship, and that was just a short thing that happened, and then just move on to the next thing, and nothing feels super connected. There's a shot of Aquaman right before the big crab daddy, Gimli, puts on his helmet, and Aquaman says, thank you, your highness, and then swims away. But in that shot, he's like entirely CG. Like every other shot of Aquaman in the movie, it's live action filmed face, just composited onto whatever, maybe add some CG hair, throw him in the CG universe. But it was a real actor, but in that shot, he was entirely CG. It was like the Chrono Bowl scene in The Flash, and it was really obvious, and I was like, why is that a thing? The movie just kind of ends really awkwardly. All of the characters are standing on top of an iceberg. None of them look cold. None of them look like they were filmed on the same day. They're all just kind of standing awkwardly apart from each other. Patrick Wilson just dives into the water, doesn't seem cold. He's fine. And the movie's over, and it was really shit and not worth not worth watching. Wasn't even fun to watch like the first one in any ironic or unironic way. It was just, wow, this is a bland movie and it looks like nobody cared. That's the big difference between the two Aquaman films, is that the first one, it seemed like people cared. And even though it was bad, there was some interesting stuff about it, and now nobody cared, and it was not interesting at all. 2 out of 10 for this film. Cameo.com/ADUM. I hear you're turning 25. You're probably a pedophile. I do birthdays. I do weddings. I do funerals. I do anniversaries. Dear Adam, please roast my husband. I do not love them anymore. Their favorite film is Call Me By Your Name. Call Me By Your Name, more like Call Me By Your Gay. Tell me their interests so I can make it personal. George Orwell, more like George Snorwell. Ooh. I will say anything that is not against terms of service. Hey, your friend wanted me to let you know you're just bad. Everybody's been trying to tell you, and nobody's really found the words to say it. You're just bad. And you're probably a pedophile. I will roast the shit out of your grandma. I can't even give them the finger. That's bad. Guarantee them that this Christmas, the turkey will not be the only roast.